notes are legitimate, though they are still investigating, including one sent to media outlets that set today as a deadline for payment.
First, I think, was 5 o'clock today, and then it had a second deadline after that. So we are continuing. In a normal kidnapping case, there would be contact by now.
The FBI says at least one of the ransom notes is fake.
We have made one arrest related to an imposter ransom demand, and a complaint will be presented to a magistrate judge later today.
And Jake, we spent some time this afternoon speaking with the sheriff. He told us that Uber driver had been interviewed. It was a female driver, that they had seen video from inside the car, that everything appears to be fine. It does not appear that driver is going to be a suspect in any way. And the sheriff also told us that all of Savannah Guthrie's family members continue cooperating with investigators. And the sheriff still remained striking an upbeat tone, believing that they will be able to find Nancy Guthrie alive. But with every passing day, everybody knows that the urgency of this moment just intensifies even more than it already is. Jake?
All right, CNN's at Levendera in Tucson, Arizona. Thanks so much. Let's bring in Mary Ellen O'Toole. She's a former special agent and senior profiler for the FBI. Mary Ellen, what was your biggest takeaway from what officials told us today?
One thing that really struck me today is when the sheriff talked about the offender may not have forced his way into, or their way into, the residence. So there may not have been indications of forced entry. And I think that that consideration is very important, because when a profiler is looking at the fact pattern of this case, they're looking at a low risk victim in a low risk environment when they were approached. And then if the offender was able to access that house without breaking down the front door, that would suggest that there was some kind of recon that was done on that property before the kidnapping ever took place, which is consistent with what we're seeing thus far, that this offender probably had knowledge of that neighborhood, probably had knowledge of the house and the comings and goings within that house, which is consistent with certainly other kidnappings that I've worked. And when you see that fact pattern begin to shape, with those variables, it suggests someone that, again, has knowledge of that property, and the pool of suspects begins to narrow. And that's important for investigators.
And we learned today that the FBI was involved in the creation of that video last night that Savannah and her brother and sister released, although they did emphasize it was the family's decision to make and post it. And there did seem to be a suggestion in that message that they were speaking to whoever is holding their beloved mother, and that the proof that they have her wasn't necessarily credible enough. Is that what you took from that?
It is, and I've been involved in cases where I've scripted the family on what to say, and I thought it was very well done, because it communicated two themes to me. The first theme, and I've been involved in cases where I've scripted the family on what to say, and I thought it was very well done, because it communicated two themes to me. The first theme was to humanize their mother, and I thought they did a beautiful job of that. Now, that would not appeal to the kidnapper, because kidnapping tends to be a crime that for offenders who are very cold and callous and have no regard for their victim. So it would not have appealed to the kidnapper, but that's not who it was intended for. It was intended for if there were any co-offenders that are involved in this case who don't have the same personality traits, or someone who knows the offender, suspects that they may have been involved in this case, and they would have been touched by the appeal, the emotional appeal by the family. And the second theme, though, of the appeal was very transactional. You do this, we'll do that. That would have appealed to the kidnapper. So I think there were two themes, and both were very effective.
We're in what people call a post-media age, meaning that a lot of people get their information from influencers, from YouTubers, from folks who don't have the same editorial standards or techniques or protocols as legacy media. And the sheriff today felt the need to push back on some of the reports in terms of whether there was a prime suspect, in terms of whether or not the cameras in the house had been smashed, things that were just inaccurate. I'm wondering what kind of impact does that have on the investigation? What kind of impact does that have on the actual criminal to see the confusion here?
Sure. When my concern is that when there are theories or misinformation that are put out to the public, the offender is watching the press conferences. They're paying attention to how the investigation is evolving. And if it looks like the investigators don't know what they're doing or there's conflicting information, that empowers an offender. And we don't want that. We want to show a show of force that we know what's happening and we're making progress. That's really important because otherwise, when you empower an offender, he's less likely to make mistakes. Right now, we want this offender to make mistakes. That's important. So when we misinform in the public, it can have critical consequences for the investigation.
The sheriff confirmed today that the investigators were able to identify the blood on the front porch of the home as Nancy Guthrie's home due to DNA testing. What do you make of that, given what we now know about the timeline?
Well, I think that's important. And of course, the blood spatter pattern is going to be important as well. How did that blood fall from the victim to the floor? What does that indicate in terms of the injury pattern? So that's certainly one thing. But I think the other thing that's important about that is if there is other blood that was commingled with Nancy's, they would have run it through CODIS, which is the acronym for the FBI database where we can put in a sample and maybe hopefully identify someone. That doesn't seem to be the case here, but it doesn't mean that it ends there. The FBI has other techniques which they can use in an attempt to identify any other blood that is not consistent with Nancy's and come up with the name of somebody.
Mary Ellen O'Toole, thank you so much, and thanks for your expertise. For anyone out there watching or listening who may have any information, no matter how big or how small you think it is, related to Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, regardless of what nonsense you hear on social media about this investigation, please call the Pima County Sheriff's Department at 520-351-4900. That's 520-351-4900. Or call the FBI tip line at 1-800-CALL-FBI, or reach the agency online at tips.fbi.gov. That's tips.fbi.gov. Coming up here on The Lead, the president's contradiction, adding a new layer of questions about why exactly the director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, felt the need to fly to Georgia to be on site as the FBI raided an election office in Fulton County to seize ballots from almost 6 years ago. But first, some of the details emerging in the newly released Epstein files and a major resignation stemming from private emails now public.